everyone, welcome to another episode of Spotlight on CS Operations. Matthew Lind in Austin, Texas, with my co-host, Jean Neuron up in the Northwest.
Hey, Matthew.
Hello, and I have brought yet another Austinite here to the party. Everybody welcome Alex Turkovic, who is Director of Adoption Programs at Flexera. And also, so he's done this gig once or twice, he is the founder and the host of the podcast Digital Customer Experience, which has been around a year or so, Alex?
Almost a year. A
year. You're like crossing through episode 50 or so at about the time we're recording this?
Yeah, 51, actually. It's crazy.
Okay. We'll get you a silver podcast for honoring your 50th anniversary.
Yeah. There's no badges for podcasts, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, it is a pleasure to have you here, and it's a pleasure to hopefully invite you to the other side of the table where we want to, hear from you and understand what you're up to. So tell us about yourself. Tell us how you started a podcast, or why you thought that would be an amazing thing to do.
It's funny because I have this thing, like my mother back in the day used to run a public radio station. And so I have a fondness for the format of radio, and always have, because I always used to just hang out at the station, and once in a while they'd let me behind the mic and do some weird stuff, which is super fun. And but fast forward to a year ago, or a little bit more than a year ago, I was like, hey, you know what, there's nobody kind of focusing knowledge on digital customer success like in one place. There's articles here and there's episodes of podcasts here, but I wanted to kind of create a one-stop shop, if you will. And one of my stupid hobbies is going and looking for URLs that aren't being used, and just on a whim I put in digitalcustomersuccess.com and it was available, and I took that as a sign from the universe to go and start. So that's literally how I started.
It's amazing. I didn't know that story, but it's amazing that was free. And no one has swooped that one up. So
I mean, seriously, yeah. Every other customer success or CX or whatever, if you go look for URL names, they're all taken by somebody. So I lucked out, I think.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Mm-hmm. And it's cool to hear the story. You definitely, I gotta say, there's definitely an aura of radio vibes coming from you. The look, the way you've got the microphone, the voice. I mean, you could tell that there's something in your DNA that maybe you were born for this.
Maybe, yeah, maybe. I mean, look, it was the kind of thing where, as part of my own kind of professional life in CS at Flexera, formerly Snow Software, I was having these conversations with people anyway, just from a networking perspective and best practice sharing perspective. And at some point it was just like, hey, it's a shame we're not recording this. It's a shame we're not putting that out. And I was like, how hard can it be? And a year later, as you guys probably know, the grind of a regular show it's a real thing. So it's been a labor of love for sure.
It is, but that origin story, we could probably have said that almost verbatim, because John and I were saying the same thing. We're we have these conversations, we get together, and of course, there aren't quite enough CS ops people to be concentrated in any one spot. Although there's a couple of us hanging around Austin, but we end up speaking virtually anyway. And so John and I were like, we should just press the record button on some of these conversations and actually share them. So
that's right.
We relate.
Yeah, for sure.
What are some of the thinking back over 50 episodes of your podcast? What are some of the patterns, the trends that you've gotten to observe? Now that you're not necessarily speaking to one person, but you're able to think of it as a year's worth of content. What has emerged to you as the host as you've talked to all of these folks?
Well, I mean, a couple things. Obviously, I'm very focused on digital and digital CS. But I think the one thing that maybe not a lot of people talk about, but it is, I think, a very obvious thing, is the intersection between digital CS and CS ops, because I mean, the two are so tightly interrelated. Because hey, guess what? In order to have, solid digital motions, you got to have some way of automating stuff. That's ops. You got to have data. That's ops. You got to have program management and PMs like managing things, and so I think ops and digital are so tightly intertwined that they're almost inseparable, and I think in some ways that's why you see some digital motions coming out of the ops teams, and vice versa, some digital teams kind of morphing into ops for CS where they don't have an ops function already. But in terms of trends, obviously we've seen a proliferation of digital over the last couple of years, because we have seen a pretty massive shift in CS from this growth at all costs mentality to, hey, let's try to make things a little bit more profitable. And so that means scaling, and that means, digitizing. And, I think one of the things that's been beaten into the ground is this whole notion of, digital for scale, and your digital programs should, make the customer journey more automated and all those kinds of things. But I think still one of the things that a lot of people aren't necessarily talking about that are in the weeds is this notion of like, hey, we need to make our CSMs more efficient as well as part of this whole digitization. It's not just customer. In fact, I think healthy digital programs focus as much, if not more, on the internal processes and automation than the customer-facing motions. So a lot of people are starting to talk about that for sure.
I'd love to double click on that a little bit more. Like you're talking about a few kind of aspects there, a few parts of the program, I guess, like,
Yeah.
and then breaking it down into like, how do you drive your CSMs or make them more productive?
Yeah.
You're also talking about like, how do you augment the journeys and maybe digitize some components of it? Do those like kind of, have you been seeing like those break down into any other buckets? Like now we're seeing AI come out, and I think maybe a few years back before this whole AI thing came out, we were all just like hard scripting our digital campaigns, and everything was very like, trigger based, like if then statements. What are you seeing now, or what are you hearing about now that's maybe happening out there that people should be aware of?
I mean, the AI thing is huge, obviously, and every platform under the sun is trying to adopt some form of AI, some better than others. Some are being built from the ground up now using, machine learning and all those kinds of things, which is pretty awesome. One area I've been focused on is, the practical end user kind of use case of artificial intelligence for the CSM specifically. And while, platforms like Gainsight have started to surface some features, and, other platforms are obviously searching features, I think one of the areas of opportunity for CSMs in general is just prompting, like enablement around how to actually prompt ChatGPT to get out of it what you need. Because a lot of us, I'm guilty of this. When I first opened my first prompt, I asked it a question and it gave me a response, and I was like, okay, that's kind of cool, but not really useful. And then, I left it a few months and then came back. I was like, okay, let's really try and figure this out, and let's figure out like how to be super specific and how to be, how to get out of it what you really need. And so I think there's a skill set there that we can help kind of develop end users how to really get the most out of just ChatGPT itself. Whether whatever platform you're using, they have features or whatever. You just go to ChatGPT or Bard or whatever your platform of choice, and learn how to prompt a little bit more kind of intelligently. So really been focused on that and seeing a lot of cool things coming out of that, and certain frameworks that people are following that are pretty cool.
It's curious to me. I heard someone say, it was probably a year ago now, who predicted within a year, so we'll see if it was true or not, that like prompting would be a core skill that a
Yeah.
CSM would have to have.
Right.
And I think you could put CS ops in there in that bucket pretty easily as well. Of like, yeah, knowing what the recipe is
Yeah.
for how to maximize the tools that are out there. And I would say I don't necessarily have a prompting framework that I work with, but yeah, I can see where
There's
that's
one,
going to be.
if you want one, there's a really good one called the Risen framework. And I have to look at it every time, but I just pulled it up. It's RISEN. So R is your, state your role. So what do you want the ChatGPT to act as? I is instruction. So you give it some instruction of, hey, write me a summary of, or write me an article about, or whatever. Then steps is S. You want to give it like some exact steps on, create 3 subpoints, a strong introduction, a strong hook at the end, and those kinds of things. End goal is E, and you want to really be specific about what should the end goal of this piece of work be. And then narrowing, I think, is probably one of the most important bits, is N, where you want to tell it what not to do. And in my case, I always prompt ChatGPT or whatever to not make stuff up, because like generative AI is notorious for just making stuff up if it doesn't know or whatever. And I said, don't use only things that are factual.
Okay. Well, I just learned that that's something you could ask. I feel like that's the small print at the bottom of
Yeah.
the TNC or something, and that's the small print of like you have to ask ChatGPT or whatever tool it is that you're using. Like,
But
please
what's interesting?
please don't embellish.
What's interesting about that, though, is, okay, this is probably a 500-word prompt now. And from an ops lens, you could have probably written a rule set to do the exact same thing in a less amount of time. Right? So it's like, okay, which one's better? We're still in this infancy when it comes to AI, that I think at some point prompting will probably become irrelevant because we'll have tools that do the prompting for us. But it's this weird kind of intermediary phase we're in.
And I find, like, as well, like, yeah, if you have to do that for every single question, like, yeah, you're spending a lot of time injecting in text, right? But
Yeah.
what are some of the things that you're seeing people use ChatGPT for? Like, what are some of is it writing digital campaigns, or what are some of the good things that you've seen there?
I see people using it for all kinds of things, but they're not necessarily like the right things to use it for. Like, I don't want please don't write your emails using ChatGPT. Like, still be human about it. You can, start with a template and kind of go from there. But I use it extensively for just ideas, and, ideas generation, and really trying to figure out, what do I want to do? I want to accomplish a certain goal. Give me some ideas for how to accomplish it. It's fantastic for brainstorming and just kind of kicking your brain into gear. I think that one of the use cases that I think is used most often right now is just call summaries, which I think have gotten to the point with platforms like Update AI and Fathom and others, where those call summaries are actually pretty darn good. And a cool hack that I've uncovered recently is, if you have like an AI call summary that's come from one of your platforms, dump it into a platform like Gamma, and it'll create a call summary PowerPoint deck for you that's branded and all that kind of stuff. And you can send that out, and it's decent. I mean, it's like 80% of the way there, and it makes it look real good. So,
All right. Did not know. I've been wondering, because I'm not a great slide maker.
Yeah.
Probably dating myself, because that was just not a skill that was terribly important when I was in my educative years. But I've often wondered when AI would start cracking the sort of the slide
Gamma is super
presentation
cool.
area.
Go play with it.
Okay. Okay.
It's on my
I'll give
list.
it a
I'm
look.
definitely going to check it out after this call here. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, for sure.
Not that I want to go, to all AI episode, but I have one more question in the space, and it definitely relates to ops, to the careers that the three of us have, which is where do you see ops role in AI? And what I'm really going for is like kind of, is it to train a CSM on how to write a prompt? Is it to somehow take AI and bake it back into maybe the more traditional rules based universe of like, wow, we used the creative part, the generative part a little bit, and now we're going to sort of bake it back into the older paradigm of rules based. Um, is it just to lower all the guardrails and be like, everybody have at it, just do it, do what you do, and we'll do a retro in a month and see who did what?
Mm,
Where do you think ops podcast about ops? Where do you think ops fits in here?
yeah. Um, I think that the lens, I mean, to approach anything, right, is how is this going to help my customer? How is this going to help my CS professional to do their jobs better? And if the answer is it's not going to, then don't do it, obviously. But like, I think there's kind of like the internal element of, okay, are there tools that can help my internal teams to be more efficient, and let's test those out. I think ops role here is to know what tools are out there that can help achieve the goal, and to basically be the voice of implementation with those tools, and to adjust the guardrails and whatnot. Whether it's an internal tool or whether it's customer facing is a little bit irrelevant. But I had Carrie Ardelon on the podcast not long ago, and she was talking about their implementation of an AI chatbot at Qualtrics, and they took a very cool approach to this chatbot, which is basically intended to be customer facing, but it's trained on all of their documentation and knowledge base and all that kind of stuff. And they rolled it out internally first. As a tool, as an enablement tool, because CSMs could, or anyone in support or whatever, could query this chatbot and get instant answers that were factual because it's trained on their actual documentation. And then they took the steps of rolling it out across segments to the customer after they'd kind of tested it thoroughly. But I thought, that is a really good kind of example of how an ops team can help plan those things out and make sure that things are kosher and they're working and data's flowing correctly, and then ultimately the goal that the reason why you bought that tool or that widget or that thing actually comes to fruition, and you drive the value out of that.
I like that approach, the phase gating of like making sure that it works internally first before we go externally.
Yeah.
I think it makes a lot of sense, because these things are a bit of a black box and we don't know how they're going to fully answer, and you'd hate to put it in front of a customer first before you
Totally.
really see what it's doing.
Yeah.
It's such a cool topic. Like we're going through it at my current company as well, and looking at how we can leverage AI more. I'm definitely taking that gating back to the team here, and to talk about maybe how that might be able to help us there.
Yeah.
Are you seeing anything else, like when it comes to driving engagement? So like, you talked about a bot. I'd say that those are like much more like a space where a customer can come and ask questions, and then the customer has to engage it.
Yeah.
I assume you're seeing a lot of stuff around proactive communications and things going out, like outbound out to customers. Are you seeing AI being used in that motion as well, or is it still, this kind of triggers sort of if then, customer usage is down, send this message? Or
Yeah, I
are
think
you
it's
starting to see
definitely
this?
a combo. I think it's a combo. I think you're seeing a proliferation of inbound in digital in general. Like you have these platforms now that are tying, basically trying to create customer hubs and destinations for your customers, which ultimately you want to train them on using if you have them in place, right? Because the nightmare scenario is always that you have, your community over here and your docs over here and your training over here, and you're sending out 5 different links, and at that point it becomes super confusing. And in that world, you kind of have to be more proactive and have to be more outbound and have to be like very pointed, like you're having problems with this, go take this training, versus if you're able to consolidate all that information into one place, that sets the stage for you creating this inbound environment where, sure, health score goes into the red. Maybe that's a CTA for somebody to engage, or maybe that's, a trigger for a specific email. But ultimately, you want to drive them towards that single point, that single resource, if you have the luxury of having that. So, I don't know. We're in this in between phase where there, in my view, there still hasn't been like this enterpriseation, if that's a word, of like CS tech. Like it's all just, it's like CS tech vomit, and that's the clip for the show. And then the challenge is wrangling all of that into to like a single resource or some kind of organized resource. So. It's a good question that I just gave a very wishy-washy answer to.
I love your point about vomit, though, honestly, and the fact that all of them are I don't know how many emails you get a day, but like I feel like they're all attacking us to try their latest and greatest tool that they've just come up with overnight, and they've got 3 people working on it out of God knows where.
That's right. Yeah. And if if you've gotten large enough to where you have separate teams managing all these different tools, then at that point, the voice of the outbound voice of your company to the customer becomes just diluted and crazy. So I think ops, customer ops is like a massive opportunity to try to wrangle all that stuff around the customer journey.
Yeah.
I was going to go with the slightly less gut-wrenching, death by 1,000 logins, so, which suits me visually just slightly more. But I think, Alex, you've hit on something, which is, getting those resources in concert not only makes your team more efficient, but it makes them more effective and gives you that voice to say, we have a plan for you, dear customer. Yeah. We have even laid out some of the map that you can walk to go through it, as opposed to, I was talking to a company not too long ago, and like they had in-app messaging in one group, and they had customer marketing was doing some stuff, and they were following up on some surveys, totally another group, and CS was not doing any of those. They were also making a play, and it was just very clear that there was no coordination.
Yep.
Among the groups. They all very, very well intentioned and all effective in their own right. But I wanted to know, like, what's the customer experiencing? Everyone who's doing their very well intentioned and well planned programs. What's the actual customer product that we've created here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a huge opportunity for us to regularly secret shop our own stuff. And what I mean by that is, I very often refer to B2C, for this kind of stuff, because B2C has got it figured out for a long time. And there's a very well-known concept in B2C where you go secret shopping, which means you send somebody into the store, you have them go buy stuff. And then when they come out of the store, they fill out a survey, and it's a very simplified version of it. But I think a lot of folks don't take the time to like put themselves into into the customer flow, because I think it's amazing what you experience when you do, or what you don't experience when you do.
Yeah, I love that perspective. Like it's not so unlike what you described as Carrie doing, where it's like, well, we're going to roll this thing out internally and see how it goes. It's sort of like, I'm going to make that fancy new recipe for my dinner party, but I'm going to try it out at home first with the regulars. And
that's right.
Hopefully it doesn't turn into CS vomit. The case may be.
That's a good point about secret shopping. Secret shopping is so much easier now with incognito. You just go online, you can easily chat at your bot and see what it's going to say, act like a customer. And you
Yeah.
don't actually have to put on a fake, fake nose and some weird glasses or something and a mustache. You can just show up as incognito.
Yeah.
When you look at your digital program, like maybe in your world today, like marketing, there's so much that marketing has created, right? Like account-based marketing, digital marketing, like social media, like there's so many different programs that they're always looking at. In your space, when you're thinking about like digital campaigns or digital customer marketing, what kind of other things are you thinking about? Like is obviously AI is a big bucket there, but are there other buckets that you're also thinking about in your program?
Ooh, yeah. I mean, I like that you brought up the marketing bit because I think one of the biggest challenges in operating digitally is that collaboration between departments. Because, I think we talked about it earlier. You've got marketing doing stuff, you've got product doing stuff, you've got sales sending out surveys, you've got, all the different folks, well-intentioned, kind of, trying to get feedback and interact with customers and things like that, but it ends up clouding things. So, especially right now where we kind of have this opportunity right now at Flexera to kind of retool how we do things digitally. We're really focused on the customer journey, and I know everybody loves that word, but we're like super focused on like, okay, what is the ideal like happy path, and how are we going to support that digitally, cross-functionally across departments to where a customer is never asking us what the next step is, or a customer is never like confused, lost, whatever, and that it's way easier said than done. So we're really focused on just getting back to basics, reining it in a little bit, and just focusing our communications to the right persona, because that's also a little bit challenging. Yeah, we're focused a little bit on AI, but a lot of it is just back to basics, digital, and how we really do in-app well, how we do email well. We're even thinking about how do we do LinkedIn? How do we do SMS? Because a big part of our audience lives on their cell phones. So
Sure. Meeting the folks where they are.
That's right.
I hear that one. Hey, Alex, as we start to wind down here, I have a question, and I really should have put this one at the beginning, but we'll stick it at the end. You've hosted 50 episodes of your own podcast. And I know you've done some in-person presentations at some of the events. Have you been a podcast guest since this started?
Yeah. Quite a few.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's always a weird experience, but I love doing it because it, gets you out of your like normal operating mode. So,
okay.
I've been honored to be asked by a few, and including you now. So
amazing. Oh, we have been honored to have you. I know you and I get to hang out on occasion in person, and it's a treat, but now a whole bunch of other folks will sort of get to listen in, eavesdrop, and have Jean along for the ride. So it's been a pleasure. We're so thankful to have you join us today.
Likewise. Thank you. I'm a huge fan of the show. I love what you guys are doing. Love what you guys are talking about. And happy to be here.
Thanks again. Yeah, I'm looking forward to. I gotta go check out some of your episodes. I want to learn more on digital customer experience. It's such an important thing. So thanks again for joining us.
For sure.
Yeah, we'll wrap it there. And Alex, I hope you enjoyed this conversation because I sure did.